Here, let's look at this Onion article about is journalism's sacred duty to endanger the lives of as many trans people as possible. The task of reporting is not a simple one. Each and every day, reporters and editors of publications like The Onion make difficult decisions about which issues should receive attention, knowing that our coverage will influence not only how people think, but also how they act. This responsibility is at the core of an ongoing debate over whether news coverage of transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people is unduly biased. As the world's leading news publication with a daily readership of 4.3 trillion, The Onion is compelled to weigh in. We firmly believe that it's journalism's sacred duty to endanger the lives of as many trans people as possible. Quentin is a 14-year-old assigned female at birth who now identifies as male against the wishes of his parents. His transition was supported by one of his unmarried teachers who is not a virgin. He stole his parents' car and drove to the hospital where a doctor immediately began performing top surgery on him. Afterwards, driving home drunk from the hospital, Quentin became suicidally depressed. He wonders now, homeless and ridden with gonorrhea, if transitioning was a mistake. We just made Quentin up, and that's okay. By the way, this literally reads like any article that you would see that's anti-trans, so much so that while this is a joke, because it's on The Onion, when you're reading it, you're like, okay, this is kind of fucked up that they're even writing this. Because, like, that's literally what these fucking articles are always about. They'll be like, out of the thousands of trans people that have successfully transitioned and are very happy, we went and found a detransitioner who, like, you know, had a bad time. So we're just going to only talk about that person as though it is reflexive, as though it's, the entirety of the population. We just made Quentin up, and that's okay. It doesn't mean stories like his aren't potentially happening everywhere constantly. Good journalism is about finding these stories, even when they don't exist. It's about asking the tough questions and ignoring the answers you don't like, then offering misleading evidence in service of preordained editorial conclusions. In our case, endangering trans people is the lodestar that shapes our coverage. Frankly, if our work isn't putting trans people further at risk of trauma and violence, we consider it a failure. We stand behind our recent obsessed seeming torrent of articles and essays on trans people, which we believe faithfully depict their lived experiences as weird and gross. We remain dedicated to finding the angles that best frame the basic rights of gender nonconforming as up for debate, and we will use these same angles over and over again in hopes that this repetition makes them suffer. As journalists, it is our obligation to entertain any and all pseudoscience that gives bigotry an intellectual veneer. We must be diligent in laundering our vitriol through the posture of journalistic inquiry, and we must be allowed to fixate on the genitals. This is satire. Yes, this is The Onion making fun of the New York Times and, like, what the New York Times' approach has been to, like, covering trans issues. The best part about this is, like, New York Times does this, and then they'll be like, what do you mean? We're just being objective. If anything, we're too pro-trans. It's against free speech to stop us from fixating on the genitals. This can also, of course, this line right here, New York Times talking about trans people, teenagers specifically, or conservatives talking about Hunter Biden. It's like at the heart of every reactionary movement is the penis and the vagina, okay? What you need to understand is, like, conservatives have made it their goal to know what is going on in everyone's pants, okay? They just have to know. They're like, literally, they're like penis inspection day. Let's make that a reality. Think I'm joking? They tried to push that in Ohio. Remember, penis inspection day is a very real thing that the Ohio state legislature tried to push, okay? Like, the Republicans in Ohio, unironically, were like, if you suspect a teenage girl is actually a trans teenage girl, then you are entitled to check their pants, check their underpants. This was a very real Ohio piece of legislation because these people are fucking psychotic. I'm not even kidding. This is a real thing. Not even slightly pedophilic law. Yeah, just completely pedophilic. Exactly. Not even slightly. Anyway, much of the recent debate concerns medical procedures, particularly in children, and whether things like hormone replacement therapy or gender-affirming surgeries are safe and appropriate. Indeed, there are critical questions to be asked about the social complexities of gender, as well as medical ethics in a profit-driven healthcare system. We are simply not interested in any of that. Instead, we will use flawed data and spurious logic to repeatedly write the same hand-wringing arguments asking whether there are suddenly too many trans people around. Journalistic integrity demands nothing less. That's my favorite that's my favorite intellectual curiosity argument is always like, so what's up? Are there like too many trans people now? What's going on with that? It's like, dude, you're not writing like an intelligent you're not writing an article that is like intellectually curious. You're just basically trying to, intellectualize your bigotry. What's up? What's the deal? What's going on? What do you mean too many? What the fuck does that mean? What's it to you, you fucking idiot? Mind your own goddamn business. Naturally, courageous reporting like ours has its detractors. Our critics accuse us of transphobia and are trying to murder us online with their online mobs. They want to destroy our right to free speech and have us arrested by all the police. What gives? Why would you want to arrest us? When it's those deviant trans people you ought to be arresting instead. Do you know what the science says about trans people getting arrested, huh? What if we could find data saying trans people should be more likely to get arrested? What will our detractors say then? They'll be silent. As well, they should be, and free speech will survive one more day. For more evidence of our time-honored journalistic commitment to endangering lives, please see our previous coverage of gay people, immigrants, black people, and women. Institutions with massive platforms like ours must be open to different ways of endangering the trans community. That might mean using the framework of medical care as a boogeyman to imply that trans people are engaged in something sinister. That might mean turning isolated instances of detransitioning into sweeping generalizations about children being groomed. That might mean identifying the worst prejudices that transgender people face and encouraging our readers to adopt them. Did you forget yet about how we wrote that there might be data showing that trans people should be more likely to get arrested? What if that were true? Or what if non-binary people are 10 times more likely to traffic infants? What if puberty blockers are a kind of sex crime? What if doctors are climbing through the windows to suture penises to sleeping cheerleaders? The next time you see a trans person, you ought to ask yourself these questions. Again, this is satire, but it is so fucking close to reality. Way that they fucking cover trans issues literally is like obsessive and from a position of like either sheer disgust or the most positive coverage still is usually like, well, they're doing something weird over there and I don't really understand it and therefore it should be illegal. All great journalists and even those lesser journalists who don't work for The Onion eventually ponder why we do what we do. Is the point of reporting to illuminate the world around us so that we may make meaning of it? Or is it to cause people in minority groups to question their humanity and persuade others to demonize them? We know where we stand, proudly dreaming of genitals, and you will never stop me from thinking about genitals. It is illegal for you to stop me from reading, writing, and thinking about genitals all the time. What's going on? There was a proud moment in this country where we could write and talk about genitals all the time. Nowadays, liberals want to take that away from you. Ted Kaczynski. Research shows that trans people are over 4 times more likely than cisgender people to be a victim of a violent crime. We salute our colleagues across the media who are working tirelessly to make that number even higher. Won't anybody think when students change gender identity and parents don't know? Yeah. Won't anybody think of the transphobic parents? Is a really funny argument to make. Is a really funny way to write this article. Because like, the victims in that situation are the thousands of queer kids that are, homeless, right? Like pushed away from their families at the verge of suicide. Like, but the New York Times is like, but what about the parents who pushed them out? Why is nobody talking about the parents? Dating another race and parents don't know type beat? Exactly. I know. Wait, this was published yesterday? Yeah, I know. That's why we're doing this. That's why we're making fun of the New York Times. I covered this extensively yesterday. This article is gross.